Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. So in this video I'm going to take you through what I'm calling my Sisters of Nurgle, which is a Death Guard stroke Sister of Battle mashup for kill team, but also to expand my Death Guard army. So showing you a few of the completed models there. If you want to see how I've done it, stick around to the end. Now in typical YouTube fashion, this is where I beg for subscribers. So if you do enjoy what you're watching, like, comment, subscribe, and check out Adam's hobby stuff on Facebook and Instagram. Let's crack on with the build. So I've got a 1000 point Death Guard army that I do want to expand and 3000 points of Sisters, and we're doing this build from those spare parts. Now I've used Triumph of St. Catherine to make a lot of character models, so I've got 2 of those spare. I also had a spare squad of Retributors that I just never got around to using, and a single Superior from the squad, so we're working on 8 bodies. And I started the build by literally putting together the 2 St. Catherine bodies. And as I was doing it, kind of picking up weaponry from the Death Guard spare sprues, and this is off a Death Shroud, and thinking, yeah, I could have them holding that. My concept was, oh, that could be a banner bearer, because these sisters are researching into forbidden technology and captured weaponry. I then built the next model where she's holding the chalice and thought, oh, actually the bell icon from a normal Death Guard would be converted and fit into there. And I set them to one side thinking, not quite convinced, but we'll see, and then carried on with the build and the rest of the models. Started putting a Superior together, as you can see here. Lucky enough to have some Plague Bearer pieces knocking around, and thought actually that these might fit quite nicely onto the front of the torso. So have a dig out. Now if you haven't got these kits, because obviously this is quite a lot of spares to have knocking around, you could go out and buy them. Would be quite expensive to do that, but it would give you a very unique army, I suppose, if you were to go and buy a squad of 5 Sisters, squad of Plague Bearers, squad of Death Guard. Well, you would have a very good beginning of a Death Guard army, especially if you were mashing these in. Now when I've done it, what I've done is taken the Plague Bearer body, you can see there, kind of test fitted it up against the model and it would work. And then I looked at the front torso part of the Sister and thought it should be nice to fit the shoulders in there. So just when you're doing these builds, I suppose that's the point, I'm not really super planning anything other than mashing together some Nurgle kits. And that's the point, to have a play. Now Death Guard are an absolutely ideal army to play. And you can see here, I'd planned to put the torso onto the Superior, which I do later, you'll see, not on the Superior though in this question. But then looked at the leg and how she was posed, realised that one of the Plague Bearer's legs is posed in a similar way. Test fitted it up against the model and thought, yeah, that'll work. And here's where you dig out the clippers, if you've seen. So clipping off that leg just below the garter thing that's on there, and using the clippers as cleanly as you can. Then I'm just using a hobby knife. Now you don't really need much more equipment than this. You could use a file to file stuff down. I did 99% of this build with a pair of clippers and a hobby knife. Now obviously be super careful when you're doing this. Use a sharper blade as possible and a hobby knife, a new blade, because there's less chance of it sticking in the model, and just be really careful when you're doing it. Now obviously there is always a risk you are going to cut yourself, but you can see here how I'm using it. Just hold at the very end, making tiny movements either towards or against. Just the smaller movements you do, the less chance of slipping. The smaller pieces you cut off, yes, the longer it'll take, but the less dangerous it's going to be to you. And going through the build, what I, in my head, the kind of background where these sisters, as I've said, have been researching forbidden technology, captured Nurgle kind of weaponry and equipment, and it's gradually started corrupting them. So I've taken lots of Imperial symbols off one model, not so many off another. So there's a Superior, you can see there I've put that Nurgle leg on one side, decided that actually a Nurgle Plague Bearer arm would work really well, simply cut that off, bit of file down, stuck on, and the rest of the build is a Repentia head and the book that comes on the Sister Superior arm. So 50-50 kind of mix of Nurgle parts and the others. Now, going back to that idea of putting the Nurgle Plague Bearer body underneath the torso, although I decided against it for the Superior, just doing it here on a normal Sister. Clipper off the front part of that body before you stick it onto the back part, and in this case I've trimmed off the kind of breastplate because the piece I was using looked like it would fit better with the very top of the breastplate removed. Clipper that down, and again deploy the clippers if you're taking off big pieces, you can see there, and then use the hobby knife if you're going to take off smaller pieces and to kind of file it to shape. Now Nurgle is an absolutely ideal army to test your first conversions, because they're meant to be a little bit, manky, not quite looking right, etc. So if you leave big gaps anywhere, we can fill it in with green stuff later, and that kind of dirty effect works really well on them. If you're doing your first conversions for, Space Marine army or Custodes or whatever, you're going to have to be really clean in how you work. So they're a brilliant army to practice your first kind of conversions. And you can see here, I didn't get it right the first time. I cut, I test fit, I keep trimming down. Obviously with the magic of skipping YouTube, I've shown you there the final effect and how I've glued that torso to the shoulder pieces. Now it did probably take about 10-15 minutes just to carve that and then get it right, and the second and third one that I did was much quicker, as you can imagine. Now you can see what I've done there is test fitted the now completed torso to the legs, realised it's not going to work with the robes and things there, so again, out come the clippers. And don't be afraid to kind of chop models up. Look, you may ruin one or two as you first start making conversions, but the more you do, the easier and cleaner it will get. And again, remembering that you can pretty much rescue most things, especially when you're doing a nurgle army like this. So again, you can see there, deploying the clippers, cutting it down to a stage when I think this is then going to fit, and just keep test fitting the pieces that you're trying to put together. So you can see there I've cut away as much as I think and thought, no, actually still slightly too wide on the model there, so go back with the clippers. You can file down obviously the leg part, you can cut down the body part as well. And this is the absolute joy of, you know, that conversion part. You might find you hate it, you might find you love it, but look, give it a go. Don't be afraid, again, as I said, to make those mistakes. And you'll see later on in this video, I kind of do one thing, think, oh, that's brilliant, I'm going to leave it, go back, change my mind. You know, you can always do the clippers back out again. And in this case, you see I've removed the grenade because it wasn't going to quite fit the body. And when you look through these models, I've left certain things on some models that I've taken off on others. And it leaves them a little bit ragtag looking, but I think that's ideal for the unit we're going for. So when you get to a point when you're happy with the body's now going to fit in there, just plastic glue to put it together. And you will notice when this goes together, there are some fairly significant gaps around the back of the torso. So in doing this, I've actually made this sister of battle slightly taller than a normal sister because of the gap we've left kind of around the waist to the legs. That's absolutely fine. That kind of demonic dimension of her effectively growing as she's being possessed, I think works really well. So now again, thinking onto the head, and you can see I am kind of ad-libbing this as I'm going through. So I'm kind of doing the build, thinking, right, now time to look for a head. On some of the previous models, I just obviously they come with the heads that fitted in, so there wasn't that chance. Here I thought, let's see if a plague bearer head works. And you'll see when you come through, you test fit it and think, well, that would have potentially worked. I just thought it made it look too plague bearer-y. So decided to change and just remove the horn and work out some way of getting that fitted to a sister's helmet. Now, that's kind of the approach. I was going with this with kind of the idea in the back of my head, kill team's coming out. I fancy doing a sister battle kill team, but also a nurgle kill team. I could use them for both, but also I could do another squad in my nurgle army, because my nurgle army at the moment is only 1,000 points. It's a patrol detachment. I want another troops choice, especially I've got a big game coming up, so I want to start building that army up. So it's kind of a multi-purpose unit, this. So what I am building is going to work as a 7-strong nurgle squad. So here you are, finishing the helmet off, scraping off the sister's symbology, and the kind of hearing vents, as you call them, on the side of the helmet, that nice circle, are ideal for putting horns and things through. So I've just used a knife to cut that off the side of the head and then glue the horn that was on the side of that plague bearer head that we sacrificed onto there. Now here's another thing that's actually really useful when you're building models, especially doing kit bashing, is a pair of tweezers. Now these are Army Painter ones that I got from my friendly local gaming store, but you could use any kind of tweezers from Superdrug for 99p. Now you notice here I'm going back at the model, so it's glued together, but I'm now finally removing the bit off the leg because there's a bit of robe on this model that was on the leg. And again, good thing to do for your first kit bash is a nurgle one, because it's actually quite difficult to file down stuff on armour particularly and get it clean. You don't have to get it clean with nurgle. Now it's time to equip the model we've built. So just using the sisters bolt gun, cut off the imperial iconography, and you see they're putting a couple of nicks and dinks into the actual sort of structure of the bolt gun, so it looks a bit more battered and nurgle. And that's that model, and you can see it in the background on the table there. On to the next one, and on this one, same principle, but I'm going to leave the chest plates on it just to make it look a bit different from the previous one, but going through the same steps we've done before. Test fitting the pieces, thinking, will this work with the legs and the torso I'm using? Starting to file it down. You see here, I actually removed the legs from this next model, so she stood far more squat and kind of wider stance than the model was originally. So you can do radical things like literally slicing the legs in half before sticking them on the model, and we can fix the gaps and worry about that later. And it doesn't matter if they're kind of slightly disproportionate and stood in stances they wouldn't normal as a human be able to stand, because look, well, 1, it's 40k, but 2, these are now possessed by demons, so you can do this kind of thing quite happily. So I mentioned before, I'm kind of doing a squad part of the kill team, but partly to expand my Death Guard army. So I wanted to use some plague knives, those kind of things. Simple to remove these from the arms of, a plague marine. Just cut slightly above the hand. You've got to not worry about the part that you're cutting it off, because that's going to get trashed, so don't worry. So give yourself a little bit of space between the part you want to keep and the part you're going to throw away, because then it makes it easier to cut it down in pieces. If you do your first cut super close to the bit you want to keep, you might ruin it. Now the left arm here is just a normal Sister Battle left arm that we've taken. I think it was off one of the heavy weapon arms, and then we've just used a pointy arm on the right hand side, and that's that Sister complete with the plague knife. So I'm going through and kind of fitting it into what a Death Guard squad would be armed with. You can see in the background now I've built another body that we've not really focused on, with the big double-handed halberd we'll come back to later, and I'm working on a heavy weapon sister. So flamethrowers, a lot of people have a lot of heavy flamers spare when you build sisters units. Build it together and cut off the front of the flamer itself. Give it a bit of a tidy down. That's the point with all these steps. I am doing a certain amount of tidying as we go every time, not necessarily removing all the Imperial icons, because some of that I'm coming back to later, putting it on, looking how it fits. Now I've done 2 Death Guard squads for my army so far, so it means I've got the Plague Spewer there. I didn't want to replace the entire Plague Spewer, because like I say, this is kind of a Sisters research squad, or whatever you want to call it, that are gradually being converted into chaos, and maybe are experimenting with the chaos weaponry. So I've just taken the front part of that Plague Spewer, removed that with clippers, glued it onto the front or the back of the heavy flamer, and it extends the weapon, makes it bigger than normal, and then I've just glued it together. Now I've not, as you can see there, it's lying on the table, I've not found a left arm for it yet. I've got another plan for that. So now with the double-handed weapon, I really like the tentacle that's wrapped around it, but not the 2 hands, because they're very, much bigger than the Sister's hands. So very carefully with your clippers, clip them off, and use the side of your hobby knife to scrape them down to get it almost normal, sort of wood looking. Remove the hands that way, and again, very carefully, very small amounts. You can see we've done a decent enough job of making that look like it's never had that on before. And I have taken off a couple of little pieces that were on there, but left that tentacle arm, which I think will fit very, very nicely onto the left arm of this Sister. So that's what we're going to go for, and we'll look at the equipment later. So the squad's now built up quite nicely. Going to work on the weaponry for what will be the Plague Champion or the Sister Superior if we're using it in, as a Sisters unit. So I've taken the left arm from a normal Sister Superior, the chainsword holding arm, cut the chainsword off, filed that down, removed very carefully the kind of guard that goes over the knuckles, and we've got the plague sword to stick on the end. But we don't want it to have a completely Imperial handle, so just very, very carefully removed the pommel of the plague sword there, and again incredibly carefully remove the pommel off the end of the Imperial chainsword, so we can almost make it a thing there. There's nothing we'll be able to do about the sort of obviously leather wrapped Imperial handle physically in a hand, but having the sword at one end, sword blade at one end, and the sort of nurgle pommel at the other should give it enough of a look to make it look like it's the entire plague sword that's being held. So 2 different ways of mounting weaponry there. Plague knife you've seen earlier, where we just leave it with the old handle, and then this one here where we've gone to a little bit more detail. So again, very small parts, and this is where it's again incredibly useful to have a pair of tweezers knocking around, so that you can use the tweezers to put those parts in, because you will drop them occasionally with tweezers, but it's much easier than doing it with your fingers, because you can knock those details around. So you see there, quite nice little pommel effect along the arm of the Sister Superior, and then all we need to do is glue the Plague Bearer sword on. Now you could, if you want, pin this in place with a pin drill and a bit of pinning wire. I didn't feel the need, because I'm generally fairly careful with my models, but it can be a useful thing, and you'll see later on we do some pinning on some of the parts that I think they're going to be a little bit too delicate, but I felt safe enough to do this. So now we're back to the one we've seen already with the plague knife, because I sort of kept looking at it, and you see the squad building up in the background on the table as I'm doing this over the course of a few days, and I thought, pointy finger not really doing it for me. Came across a bolt pistol in there, so I thought, let's equip with a bolt pistol. Same as we've already seen, cut the hand off the bolt pistol, and then I've used a Sister Battle bolt gun arm for a Superior, and cut the gun off there. Same principles we've used before. Give yourself a bit of space when you're removing. You can see here when I'm removing the hand, I don't cut right down to where I want in the initial cut. I then go around here where it's sticking out a little bit from the glove and just trim that down slowly so I can get to the point where I'm at, because if you do that first cut again, as I said before, you'll remove too much. So, gone from having a pointy arm that had been sat there for a few days actually at this point, and I was sort of happy, then changed my mind, removed it down, used a sister's hand and a nurgle bolt pistol. So don't be afraid to go back and change your conversions even when you're halfway through the project. So that's now the 8 models to a stage of near completion, but you can see there's a lot of gaps, a lot of things still to finish. So I've mixed up some green stuff. First stage is gap filling. So you'll go on your models and you'll know where all the gaps are by now, because you've taken a while to build your models over a course of a few days, or a full session if you're going crazy, and just literally piece them in. The beauty of Nurgle, you can see here, I'm not doing too much of a clean job, because you can just stuff it into the gaps, use the sculpting tool with a bit of water on it so it doesn't stick everywhere, and just make lines, creases, divots, that kind of thing, to make it look like infected kind of Nurgly flesh. They're a beautiful army for messing about with green stuff for the first time. Same thing here, you can see the Sister Superior with the sword we've talked about. Now another really useful thing in your armoury is liquid green stuff, because as you've gone through the build, you will have left patches of armour where you've removed iconography that won't be perfectly smooth, it will still be quite bumpy. You could spend hours and hours smoothing it out, or because it's Nurgle, you can just go around afterwards, use some liquid green stuff to cover that, and make almost the whole armour panel a little bit bumpy, a little bit ridged, and it looks really, really nice. And liquid green stuff is your friend. So going through here, you've seen the flamer, still not got a left arm. We're going to deal with that in a minute. So you can see we've done that. We've got the horned helmet, as we saw earlier. Then we're going to deal with the arm soon. Now you see here, I didn't include it because the footage is a bit funny, but I've heavily cut down that Death Shroud scythe that's about to go onto this. What I'm going to use as kind of the icon bearer, because I see that Death Shroud scythe being an icon. So we're going to make some arms now. You'll see this Death Shroud get armed, and some of the others. So literally making a sausage of green stuff. Now this green stuff's been left for 30 to 40 minutes, so it's not overly sticky. We just rolled out a sausage, and now we're getting some pinning wire. This is just some stuff from Green Stuff World that they sell, but you could use a paper clip, any other type of wire. You could also, if you wanted, just wrap the green stuff itself around the wire and kind of splodge it on. In this case, what I've done is made the sausage first, because this green stuff's getting, fairly dry now. So if I was to wrap it around, it'd probably be more awkward. But if it was fairly wet green stuff, you could just wrap it around the wire. And that's probably the way to go, and then leave it to dry with it wrapped around the wire. So I've done a slice into the sausage, pushed the wire into it, and then you just pick it up and sort of fold it around the wire that way, so that this wire is wrapped in green stuff. Now don't worry about getting fingerprints all over it, because that'll just give it texture when it's going onto the model, so that's actually a good thing. And you can see there, when I've cut it to the length I'm going to use, I've just left a bit of that wire exposed. Now we're going to take a pin drill, and we're just going to drill in just a little bit into, a millimetre or so into the model, and then a bit of super glue on and push that exposed pin of the arm we're making into there, and that'll just really, really hold it on solid. You don't have to necessarily do that. You could skip the wire stage, you could skip the thing stage, but it's all about strength. So we pushed it in, and then we bent the wire and manipulated it around so it's holding the flamer kind of handle, but then I didn't like how thin the arm looked. So taking a little bit of extra green stuff, starting off at the top, bulking out the join, and then moving it down the arm just to put a bit of thickness to that arm, because I did think it looked a little thin. And that's fine. We could have left a thin arm, but I just wanted that sort of bit of depth onto it. And then we smooth it out as a little bit, but leaving some of the ridges down. Now the other one where you've seen the double-handed axe that we're using, I've made a second tentacle going round, and I've equipped her here with one of the bolt guns that's on a strap possessed there. So this is kind of like 2 arms on this left hand side, holding that bolt gun ready to pull it and fire it, just again for some visual interest. Here's the Death Shroud scythe that we cut down, removed a lot of the mechanical parts off this, filed down the hands and took maybe ½ an inch off the bottom to reduce the height. Again, this is going to be my icon bearer, because this is an icon of Nurgle, and just using it with a possessed left arm, trimming it down till we get to the length that we're happy with. So this is the completed unit pre-painting that I stuck onto Instagram. So again, a bit of an Instagram plug, check out Adam's hobby stuff. So these are the 8 models for the unit. So in my head, it's going to be a 7-strong unit of Death Guard and it's going to be a talisman because we've got one with the book when I use it in my Death Guard. If I'm using it in Kill Team, having seen the new Kill Team rules, I can make up 3 or 4 different kill teams from these 8 models because Plague Marines only come in 2s. And for a Sister of Battle Kill Team, I need to add a couple more things on. I want to use some maybe Arco-Flagellants. Now, we're not going to go through a massive painting technique thing here, so if you do want to see how I paint my Death Guard or my Sisters, I'll put some links down below, you can check it out. But I'm doing kind of a mashup. So I've undercoated with Retributor armour, which is what I do my nurgle with, and now I'm putting down some it's a bulk of metal style colour onto some patches of those metal, because that's how my Sisters are painted. You'll see here as I'm working through it, I'm putting the next few layers on that we've already done and just doing the bases here, but I'm leaving that silver kind of showing through when I put the Death Guard green down, so it is like a, you know, twisted, converted kind of Sisters that are gradually turning to nurgle. With the rest of the painting, it is kind of a mashup between my Death Guard colour scheme and my Sisters colour scheme, using the same painting techniques as we go. And you see here on the shoulders there, we've got some of the silver showing through. Doing the hair the same colour as the normal Sisters, but changing the skin tone when we do that. So, you know, a twisted, converted Sisters unit, which I think works, you know, quite well. One thing I have changed, because of the nature of Death Guard, I've not done the quite, you know, light brown leather that I've done on my Sisters. Gone for some darker tones, you know, darkened down the face plates a little bit, and used a different kind of ink colour just to make them mash in more with the Death Guard. Really enjoyable to paint these. I found the green stuffing was quite nice to paint on top of, and you know, it's a bit of fun just to kind of almost troll my own army. So real happy with how the colour scheme turned out, and now I'm going to show you what the finished kind of squad looks like. So here's the 8 models again on the turntable thing, showing you what we've come up with. So you can see a mix of Imperial iconography left on them, more kind of mutated, twisted Sisters that have been exposed maybe to the Nurgle energies that little bit more, or jumped into the Joy of the Dark Gods. So I'm really happy with the unit. I think it looks really nice. We're looking forward to using it on the tabletop. So I hope you liked that. If you did and you've made it through to the video to this stage, like, comment, subscribe, all that wonderful YouTube jazz as ever. And hopefully I will see you on the channel next time.